The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everybody. This is Derek Krebs with the MSX Group, and we're going to go ahead and start our session today on Prospero. This is just one of many webinars in our educational series to educate both existing customers and prospective ones. So I see a large group in attendance today, so I'd like to welcome one and all, both again existing and prospective customers of Prospero. I will start with just a minute or two inside a PowerPoint slide for just some introductions and setting some agendas for today. But the bulk of the time, we're going to be looking inside the application. The MSX Group, as you see on this introductory slide, we are the founding members. If we turn the clock back about 25 years, where we originally started at FRX Software and Microsoft, where we helped deliver, both develop, support, and consult those flagship products on the reporting and budgeting side, like Microsoft FRX and Manage Reporter on the reporting side and Microsoft Forecaster on the budgeting. And then approximately 10 years ago, in the year of 2009, as we got acquired, we were then spun off as the MSX Group, and then that's when Prospero was released, which is an all-in-one software solution for reporting, budgeting, and forecasting. And I always like to say I'm the consultant. I'm not the sales or marketing guy, so I'll shoot from the hip and share you some of the advantages of using these nice software tools. So some nice tips and tricks I'll share with you today in today's session. As I'll continue to the next slide. And for today's agenda and topic, we're going to be focusing on reporting, especially some of the balance sheet, cash flow, and consolidated reports that you might have across company, division, department, etc. Further inside that agenda, I'm going to start with the consolidated reporting. We're going to focus on multi-company reporting, but you can fill in the blank based on your chart of account segmentation. After the income statement start, I'll then transition to balance sheets and cash flows, and along the way, I'll provide a bunch of different tips and tricks and efficiencies you can gain with Prospero. To name a few, there's awesome graphing ability to drill into your report, where you even can change that on the fly to maybe drill into company first, department second, or vice versa. We can efficiently publish these reports to be consumed and shared with other people in management within your organization. There's very nice security controls by accountants for accountants. These products we always speak of with little or no IT involvement. And there's also additional interaction of the report to add some annotations and much more. Along with the budgeting, I'll show you a splash screen or two within it. And then additionally, if you have any questions and answers, I'll have you jot down my email on this introductory slide, and I'll end with it. And I'll welcome any questions on today's webinar amongst those that are attending live. And then what we also do is we record these sessions and we'll put it out on our website to be consumed and maybe share with others in your organization. All right, that basically ends my PowerPoint. I'm going to jump right inside the application. To help me with some more detailed agenda, what I'm going to do is look to an Excel file to further identify the first topic for today, that being our consolidated income statements. And we're going to look at three flavors or reports to that. So focusing on multi-company, the first report of three is where the company is going to be our primary prompt and filter of our report. Then secondly, I'll show these companies side by side in columns. And then third, I'll show you also the ability to filter those into your line set. And that's really our foundational building blocks. To maybe recap or rephrase, we simply have for both reporting and budget input, we simply have a line set, secondly a column, and third the prompt or filter of either your report or budget screen. Followed by, we get into the balance sheet and cash flow. I'll probably save some of those detailed agenda remarks when we get to the next topic area. And let me even start by acquainting you further with the demonstration company I'm going to be logged into today. So within Prospero, I actually have a few different sessions open from both a power administrator perspective, like those people in the finance and accounting, which most people attending the sessions are. Or secondly, I also want to give you a little glimpse of what an end user might experience or navigate with inside the tool. I'm logged in currently as an administrator, so you see a few different links here where an end user might only see reports, or an end user might only see input for doing budget input. I want to begin looking at segments to give you a little groundwork of the demonstration company we're dealing with today, where our primary general ledger segments are our natural segment, like our revenue, expense, and balance sheet accounts. We call that our main or natural segment. Our second segment is location, and third general ledger segment is department. But what you're also seeing here is a company segment dimension. That's because we are on a multi-company environment. And what we do is we create that as maybe what you call a virtual segment to easily filter, distribute, and secure reports by. Let me even take one step backward in looking at this segment definition, because one of the powerful things of Prospero, both reporting and budgeting side, is yes, primarily you're going to be comparing apples to oranges, like budgeting and reporting of your general ledger companies and segmentation. However, I'll give you a little glimpse of non-general ledger data. It could be a handful of examples in non-general ledger data, like definitely budgets. Secondly, statistics, both actual and budget, which I'm a big fan of for some driver-based modeling and forecasting, or for some nice KPI, key performance indicators on your reports. Then in addition, we can even add some non-general ledger segments within this list here, but I'll just focus on the primary general ledger ones. When we do log into Prospero, if you're a multi-company environment, we normally will leverage your Windows authentication, which is one method of two. You can log into the application. So IT loves hearing that, because I do not have to maintain separate user IDs and passwords if we use Windows authentication. But in this demonstration database, we have a bunch of fictitious users not on our network. And one thing you might also see is, since we're in a multi-company environment, we only see really one company entity choice here called Prospero Demo. But on a rare case, if you're a multi-company, and on a rare case, if you have completely different chart of account structures and numbers, or even different fiscal years of your companies, or maybe complete different responsibility of people who do report on such, then we can definitely break your entities or companies into different logins. But we have all of our companies inside one Prospero instance or entity. Now let me take us to the very first report of 3 on consolidated reporting. I have this one folder where I can easily and efficiently group all of my reports together. And here's this one consolidated income statement. Now, I'm also reflecting upon my 25 years of consulting and deploying applications, because I always like to speak of differentiators of what I love as a consultant, helping customers bring the easy button to reporting and budgeting about Prospero. That is the reusable nature of these row, columns, and trees. Or in other words, no, we're not an Excel add-in tool, because I just clicked on the toolbar, this icon called the catalog view, and what we're now seeing is a list of all my reports here, which in some of these other Excel add-ins, I get no inventory of visibility in my report. Or secondly, we yes have the reusable nature. So I'm just going to click on the lines heading, and what I just did is I sorted all these reports by the line set being used. And if I scroll downward, here is where I can see, oh, I have about 10 different reports that are all sharing this one line set called income statement. I can't underemphasize how advantageous that is to your reporting and inventory world. The same concept of these reusable inventory and even seeing who last edited, generated, is so much more better than some of the other tools out there. Now, as I do open up this one consolidated income statement, it is going to be looking at budget versus actual. I'm logged in as an administrator, so what I'm going to see is, let's say, the line set being used, or here's the column definition being used. I also see some runtime settings, like what month and year I want to run it for. On the options tab, do I want to include transaction detail, yes or no, both posted or unposted? Rounding, calculation order, as I'm bullet pointing a few things I'm going to cover further today, including chart. Now for charting, I love how a picture speaks 1,000 words. To add charting ability, you do not have to learn a whole new interface or spend a day or two with a consultant. All you have to simply do is turn on that check mark, choose one of our graphical types, and lo and behold, you'll be able to analyze your data in both report form and then graph or chart form. Now, when I do run this report, here is what I call our report filters or parameters. Since we have our accounts like revenue, expense, or balance sheet in our line set, that's why we're not prompted for it. So on a more common report, I'm being asked for what company, location, and department to run it for. As we focus on company, notice how it says the word all. And what I love about Prospero versus maybe some old flagship Microsoft products is there's this tree called all, which automatically gets created and automatically gets maintained, versus in some of the past FRX and Management Reporter and Forecaster applications, you always had to manually create these and manually update them as maybe new departments and accounts, etc., come on board. So huge win and improvement as we've learned from all those 20 plus years deploying those tools. Now, secondly, I probably won't focus too much on outside of company on today's session. However, I wanted to show you for the location, and another advantage is historically in the past products, I would have to have maybe 3 or 4 different reports using 3 or 4 different trees. But now with this one report, and I always like to add, based on your user security and what assignments you have and visibility for, you might be restricted what you see. So looking at our locations, here's maybe 2 trees, what I'll call my divisional tree, and secondly, my region tree. So I can run this report on any one of these trees because here might be by our regions/locations, or secondly, here's our divisional tree more by function, like we have sales locations or operation locations. But I'm simply going to run this for all for right now. Regarding output types, I'll probably focus on the workspace, what I call our electronic viewer, which gives me a lot of interaction like drill down, graphs, all the way down to transaction detail. But I'll also take some reports and export them to some of these other options, including, let me role play, I just did my month-end journal entries. I'm going to publish this report out. How about the 20 or 30 people on today's phone call? I might be in charge of accounting. I just did my journal entries. I reviewed my data. I'm now going to run this report like there in the upper left for all company location departments. I'm just going to run it once and publish it out for all of you. That way, when you log in, you'll only be able to see the data you're in charge for. I'm focusing on one report, but additionally, I'll just bullet point that we can easily create a report collection of multiple reports. Let me go ahead and click OK. Now for interacting the report, as I like to pepper in a bunch of features and functionality you can leverage. One is going to be, my favorite, is the drill down and drill order. Since I ran this for multi-company, I'm just going to focus on this sales line. And I have really 2 primary options, what we call drilling into tree levels, or secondly, drilling into account level detail. I'll demonstrate both now. First of all, tree levels. When I drill into sales, here's my first level down, company. Like here's US company, Europe, etc. I'm then going to secondly drill into my US company. Now these are the locations, but only the US locational data. Since I ran this for a chart, at any one of these levels, I can display that as whatever chart I chose, which in this particular case, it was a pie graph. But occasionally I'll backtrack one step for review and repetition. On the chart tab, all you simply have to do is turn this checkbox on and then choose from one of your chart types. Unlike some other tools that I've personally worked with and deployed, I'd have to probably spend a whole day or two training or coaching you how to do so, but there's simple ability for that. This was an interactive chart, as I call it, meaning I could further drill down into it. I'll maybe just close a tab or two. Speaking of these tabs, I love about how I can multitask. I can bounce around, because some past instances I would have to always close and reopen windows. Now additionally, when I drilled into all columns and with a certain drill order. This is not cell-specific drill in, which I love about Prospero. Now as I go back up a level or two, Like here's my company level. I was originally graphing the locations of just US, but now here's I'm going to now graph maybe the split of sales maybe by company, or I even could always revert back to the original report view. Circling now back to the original report on what we call drill order, I went first into company, then secondly into our locations. That's maybe my preference and normal path. But what we can easily do on the fly is change the drill order. Instead of company first, location second from top down, I'm simply going to drag and drop location first. So now my first click, instead of location, or excuse me, company 1, 2, 3, it's now going to be our locations. Then secondly, how about Denver? Might be the different companies as the next level. I can go all the way down to the transaction level on this. And let me just backtrack one step, because in the options tab of the report, I was just demonstrating tree levels, which down below is where you can predefine your drill order or even change it on the fly. But I'm now going to demonstrate account level detail, which means really with one click, I'm going to see the entire kitchen sink. Now this time, when I run the report, instead of looking at all companies, what I'm going to do is, I know we have data for US and a couple of these locations, so I'll just run it for a few of these. Now what I just did was very simple, meaning on the fly, I just chose maybe the companies to run it for. I usually like to look at the big picture from top down and then slice and dice as is, but now I'm just going to run it for multiple. Now secondly, instead of just doing maybe one click choosing the different companies, what I'll maybe finally or next do is I can use a predefined line set prompt / tree of who I run this report for. But I'm going to go ahead and just click OK. I'm now going still to the workspace. But how about as that report's run? Let me show you, because since I ran it for, let's say, 4 companies, like my 3 entities, including my consolidated of all companies, it's now opening up in my viewer those 3 separate tabs. It now is giving me a little error message saying, all right, Derek, company 3 has no data. That's basically what this message is, because that's one of our older historic companies that's no longer in service. But here is tab number 1, all companies, or tab number 2, my US company, or tab number 3, Europe. Just to save a little time in this recorded session, I had previously ran this to Excel, almost the same flavor. Here is sheet number 1, all companies, like you see the yellow heading, or here is now US company number 1, or Canada company number 2. Or even if you prefer, here's maybe a PDF output for it. So save a tree, usually electronically in the workspace, because I'll also show you some advantages earlier of the drill down, drill order, and graphing. Additionally, security is a key thing, as we always want to be Sarbanes-Oxley SOX compliant on our secure financial data. And third, most efficiently to our management, adding maybe annotations to the report. And I'm just going to scroll down. There's all companies, but maybe page 2, there's US, or I can continue going downward further. Let me transition briefly. I'm now logged in as an end user perspective. Notice here in the lower left, they have very few links. Additionally, we don't demonstrate it too much, but we have a very nice quick launch area, because typically, like I might be the CFO or controller, I usually send all of you 20 plus people on this phone call, what I call my managers, maybe 2 or 3 reports. I even can create a report collection of those 2 or 3 reports and run it seamlessly for all reports across all companies. Then what you do is you might have a favorite here, and I'm going to go ahead and just click on this favorable, unfavorable income statement, which the tab is already open here. And if I come up here and change the report prompt, this end user, looking at company especially, only has one company available to them. Now, since I'm logged in to the all company, that's why it did not recognize it, but normally it recognizes your last selection based on the user, so they're not having to change and select all these. And then additionally, as I was showing that they were restricted to only company 1, they might be also restricted just to a certain either single location or group of items, and that's really through what we call trees. And we have maybe separate sessions where we look at security assignments, but super easy by you accountants for the accountants how you can set up and administer security. Let me now role play. This is a budget versus actual report. I want all of you managers, since we're almost done with quarter 1, to then reforecast the remaining year, like periods 4 through 12. This budget might be live of updates you made as of this morning when I just ran this report, this budget data. And perhaps I want you to explain some variances, perhaps this month or quarter. So here to the right on some of our completed reports, we can add annotations. So how about for sales? I'm just going to click on that line. I have the toolbar icon here, or a right mouse click, or there to the right, you might have saw me call out the annotation window. And I'm just going to say note for the account. I will not be too creative on that. Now what you're then going to see is a nice icon indicator of an item with a memo or a note. I can hover on top of that to see the description for it. Or if I wanted to see additional detail, or even maybe a second person might add additional comments like, yep, Derek, CFO, reviewed it. We had a new customer add. I could additionally add additional users or comments down here in the bottom right, or even delete those annotations or notes. They have the same type of display as chart ability. And then on the toolbar, they also have export to PDF, Excel, or I can also print this out. Going back to the budget note, even though today's session's not going to be on budgeting, I like to at least introduce that for those that do have the budgeting module, which I saw maybe about half of the existing customers and tenants do have the budgeting module. Going back to my phrase, this might be budget I just entered and updated real time as of this morning. So here is this one tab, and then here in the lower left, if this person has budgeting ability, they might have this button called input. They're only seeing one budget version, but an administrator might see best case, worst case, or quarter 1 forecast or quarter 2. And it has the same spreadsheet look and feel, but we call this Excel on steroids because this is all linked to your general ledger for regarding your segmentations or even non-general ledger, because we have, for an example, headcount, hours, full-time equivalency. We have salaries, a payroll tax here where it stops. On the HR tab, I can detail that out further by employee position, bonuses, overtimes, etc. This is a pure expense only department. I'm going to transition to balance sheet and cash flow. But notice here, these are maybe some new capital I'm budgeting, along with some corresponding depreciation automatically tabulated for me here on this highlighted line as well. And on the capital tab, here might be new copiers, tablets I'm budgeting for. And this is the focus on the budgeting side, but I'll get to in just a second the balance sheet reporting side of the house, but both sides are equally important. And this is a pure expense only department. The gray shade you stay away from, maybe the rose and white you key into based on whatever colors of the rainbow you prefer. And this maybe manager also has revenue projections. Now on this screen, especially in yellow bold, maybe some non-general ledger data. An additional example, as I was showing maybe employee data, is maybe product data and or customers or possibilities endless. So here might be the sales manager, both maybe budget or actual, giving you rid of confirming capabilities within a product. So here might be product 1, motors, product 2, compressors, spare parts, units sold, average price, whatever you want to budget by, you can simply add to the tool. There might be existing general ledger accounts you have, like account 4900 or 5900, that might exist in the general ledger, or perhaps they might be statistics that you easily create, like here's product 10A for sold, or product 10B, any IDs or codes you can leverage. Let me now return back to the administrator window, but there's maybe an end user perspective side I just want to spend a couple of minutes on. Now, since I did have this broadcasted and open previously, I mentioned something about a report collection, and what we're now seeing might be the result of that. There actually might be 4 reports. I have the option when graphing, like here in the lower left, I can have the report output directly to the report view, or I have also an option to output the report first to the graphical view, or you saw me toggle between the two easily. And you do have options of showing tabs, or in this case windows, or even side by side for more of like a dashboard look and feel to that. When I return now back to the administrator view, there's always things I like about a report and don't, and really I'm just transitioning to show companies side by side in columns as maybe my second of 3 reports. Let me just close here. I've added this to my quick access toolbar, the close all icon. Otherwise, under window, I mentioned about grouping tabs, which I prefer, or maybe no tabs if you want the more classic Windows view. And even I can show tabs or windows side by side or vertically. That's what we saw in that last window. And any one of these taskbar icons, I can right mouse click and add it to my quick access toolbar and customize that. Under the home button, maybe one little quick miscellaneous or two is we have an excellent message board, as we like to have our customer base share stories of their usage out there, like we're doing today on today's session of tips and tricks, followed by the feedback button. I love this because all those years, like the last 8 or so years working at Microsoft, there was no new features and development in those products, but thankfully Prospero's been under active development the last 10 years, and we've had tons of new features, most coming from our customer base. So we welcome all to click this feedback. Maybe 2 things primarily. It might be a product suggestion of enhancement you would love to see, or it could be an issue or support request, and I call that a red phone line into our support team, where we have a large staff that monitors that throughout the day, night, and weekend. So, all right. There's my few little miscellaneous housekeeping items. Let me return back to our consolidated report. The second of 3 is going to be showing companies side by side in my column. Now this time when I run the report, in contrast to the last time, I do not have a company as one of my parameters, because in our column is where we've added or turned on the filter for company. So here you see good old US, Europe, Consolidated. Excellent new features as I'm thinking about all those Microsoft years. I can show hidden columns like showing the account number. Yeah, and that might seem simple and trivial, but in past years you'd have to maybe have 2 separate reports either to show that or not. And then secondly, I could also show hidden lines, because notice here you see some rows down for expenses being expanded, so this might take it 1 level down, or maybe show the lowest level detail. And I'm going to elaborate on those phrases in just a second. Let me look further at both the line and column for this report. I'll expand it just a little bit for your viewing. Starting with the line set. One of my favorite features too, to reduce or avoid maintenance altogether in your line sets. One of the most common things I see in that regard is whenever you add a new general ledger account. In this case, the revenue or expense on this income statement detail, I'll call it. As I show hidden columns, let me just emphasize that, yep, I'm showing all the individual expenses above this row, or this summary account we called EXPN. I, as the administrator, can go to the line set, column, or the original report definition for this report to make some edits or review. I'm going to open up the line set. Let's continue looking at this expense line. Look at this column called natural. We might have a few ways to define what we want to grab. I could grab individual accounts. Here's where we link live to your general ledger. Or I could do a range of accounts, like here's this one net revenue row of $4,004,999. But usually what we use instead are summary accounts, like this one account called EXPN. I'm zooming into this account list, either a tree view, or here is my good old normal numeric view. And I can do some different searches on my account range from your general ledger. But I'm going to go back to this selection of the natural account, especially our tree view. And here is that default tree called all, automatically get created and maintained. Maybe different account categories you have in a general ledger, like we see our example of such. But usually in your account segment, we at minimum create maybe one custom tree based on how you group accounts for both balance sheet and cash flow. I'm only going to focus on the income statement for now for this account roll-up tree. And then here's that one node of the tree called expenses. And then here is in our tree, we've defined expenses as this range, which translated another way means I never have to update this tree as new accounts get added, and I never have to update this line set as new accounts get added to my general ledger. And this is also the same line set I even use for that budget input screen I briefly showed. Now looking to the right, that's again what we call a summary account. Some of the last key fields are simply where you say yes or no if you want to expand and show the detail above or below this row. And then here to the right, what level of detail? 0 means show me every individual account, but I could say, and a second example might be within gross profit, one level down of gross profit is my cost of goods sold and revenue. Or gross profit 2 levels down might be within COGS, maybe my overhead, labor, and material. That might be 2 levels down from this gross profit node. So you have that ability in the report to efficiently have one tree that usually controls all the integrity and consistent and reduce or usually avoid all maintenance, like we saw that total expense node that I'll maybe conclude with and review one final time. Within this row definition, looking at the properties, rarely do we need to adjust them. However, in one of the next reports I'll take you to is where we're additionally going to filter companies into our line definition. So when I turned on this company filter, it added this new column here that we see in the background, and I'll come back to this in just a moment, but I'm going to wrap up with a line set. Back to my original report, I'm going to use this shortcut icon to go to the column definition only if I have the designer access. My end users do not, typically. And then the column definition, we did something similar, meaning the properties here to the right, normally it's not turned on, but I'm going to turn it off. But notice here it says, oh, there's a filter defined. I earlier had turned that on. Then here's the filter for our company. And then additionally, I could then see, yep, maybe I want to bring in US company in this column, Europe, Canada, etc. into the other ones. Now let's take just a quick sidestep on elimination as I'm thinking hundreds of companies served over the years here. Well, most of your companies, yes, are coming from your general ledger, but I get such a common ask and need these days for grabbing non-general ledger data. So this elimination company in my example, I created literally in seconds inside Prospero, and either we link to maybe a secondary general ledger database or even an Excel file, which I'll demonstrate the latter. And let me also take one minor step back under segments, company. I can come up here, and especially if this is a new budgeted item, here is maybe company number 4, new company. I'll stop there, but literally in seconds, that's how I can budget a new item. I don't have to go through all the rigmarole of adding that to the general ledger. And even when I save this report, and now when I go back to any one of my original reports, more of it is I'm just emphasizing now real time. That new company I added in seconds is automatically consolidated in both my reports and my budget screens. This is the first report I began with, company. I ran it for all, but let me just show you again. It's now automatically included in our all tree, and then I could budget and report off of that seamlessly without having to link to a bunch of other data. Let me continue with this company number 9. It could be maybe a secondary general ledger database. We interface with about, I believe, 20 or so general ledger and interface systems today and growing daily based on needs, but also I can pump in data through an Excel file. So this elimination company data is actually coming from Excel. And let me just show you one brief Excel sheet called import data. You simply need to have a column for your company, like company 9 is our elimination company. Here's the account. Here might be the location department I want to pump it into. And this example is where I just loaded maybe 2 months of data. But possibilities again are endless. Budget, actual, GL, and statistics. And one of my earlier example is I just created some statistics for, let's say, units sold or price that I use maybe some alphabetic account that differs from my general ledger. But in the system, I simply import this in. So I love that ability to open the doors wide for whatever scenarios or needs that you have. Getting back now to this one report, I'll just close out a couple of these tabs. We looked at the column definition where I'm filtering companies side by side. I'll go back to the completed result of it. And one of my reports earlier, I spoke of running it all the way down to the account level detail, meaning I'll just drill into one of these office expense. Now what we're seeing is basically the lowest level detail, meaning it's not subtotaled. If I want to show the fully qualified account, I can do so. And I also have the option of running this down to the transaction level. But this particular report, I only have year-to-date columns, but if this were a monthly periodic column, I would see also maybe additional transaction descriptions, perhaps even the vendor or customer that came from. Speaking of, as I go back to the column definition, I just want to point out that, yep, normally we have balance columns, like actual data from your general ledger, or maybe budgets from your GL, or budgets usually from Prospero, most do have. And I just wanted to show you we have what are called detail columns, which when you drill into transaction detail, this list of detail fields is going to differ slightly based on your general ledger system and interface you're on. But on our demonstration database, we have the reference field, which is our vendor or customer. We have the source ID as our journal entry number, and we have some transaction date, but usually this list is larger based on your GL system. And this detail column seen, again, when you're reviewing transaction detail. Let me close a few of these windows. That's a great report showing companies side by side. I'll now go to the third and final report of consolidated reporting, where I'm going to do some filtering of companies in the line definition. So here's this one report I'll now wrap up with on this topic. When I generate it, like last time, or shall I say, notice I got no prompt at all for the report. Okay. Now, excuse me, let me go ahead and just bump that down to 100% as I had my screen resized and increased based on some other monitors and GoToWebinar window I'm on. So let me just close and reopen that so it's a little bit more legible for all of us here. And just to repeat, excuse the repetition, but I find it beneficial, I am not asked for any report prompts currently because I've already predefined all of my segments and companies. I'm going to start with a line set first of all. In the headed shaded cells might be my consolidated of all company, or maybe company 1, company 2, followed by the accounts beneath it. Looking at the line set, it should now be familiar with what I shared earlier. I had simply turned on for the properties this company filter, as you see that column to the left appearing or disappearing. And then I could either choose like our summary node of the tree called all, or we saw another segment like our regions or divisions where I might create my own tree that has some subgroups, as this all tree does not, but all tree again automatically gets created and maintained. Versus these next rows are where I'm just focusing on company 1, or here is company number 2. And earlier I showed the summary account for total expenses. However, this random example actually has for our revenue something similar. Let's take a look at it, because here is the same type of story. Usually your trees, we strive for ranges or wildcards, so you don't have to edit or maintain those. In this particular instance, since I'm combining both company and natural, the last time we expanded, we only expanded on the natural. But since we have two segments, like company and natural, at least I'm going to call them segments, we have the ability to define which segments, yes or no, we want to expand on. So in this revenue row, I just did an ad hoc example where maybe I want to expand by the natural versus the rows up above, we only have one line for revenue. And then as I go full circle back, we also can get fancy on some of our bolding or shading, like maybe the main line, like total revenue. Maybe I want that bolded, underlined, and indented, or maybe all the expanded items, maybe a different font or underline, which I'll just leave that as a paraphrase for now for not going into too much detail on that. But as I return back to this report, here's maybe one of my revenues only showing one line, but now here is maybe multiple lines of revenue where I simply expanded it either 0 levels, meaning every individual account, or down to the lowest level detail. And there's maybe my chart of account, meaning company 2, account 4100, company 2, account 4110 for returns, or maybe company 1, yay or nay of what you want to see. And I do have all the drill down as well, which I'll probably stop on that. All right, thank you. Usually is a whirlwind, but hopefully you have a nice recording to review back as well. Let me now transition to a balance sheet report. This maybe just keeps me a little bit on agenda for some of our topics today. Let's look at maybe two flavors of the balance sheet, both maybe a rolling report, two flavors of that, maybe where I'm only looking at the months of this fiscal year, or maybe always looking at 12 months. Secondly, maybe a balance sheet looking at companies side by side. Let me just close all tabs since I added that to the quick access toolbar. Let me come to our balance sheet folder that I've segregated these reports easily by. And then here is a rolling 12-month report. Now let me set a quick scenario, even though I probably won't open it up, but two ways to do a rolling 12-month column. One is where you only see the months of this fiscal year. There was a message about rounding adjustment. I'm going to have a little note about it. Now notice here when I ran it for November of 2019, your preference of showing the most recent column to the right or left and going backwards or forwards, whichever you want to call it as. But what I like about this column design is I'm always seeing 12 months. Because let me set a second scenario. Since we're on a calendar fiscal year, like from January to December, if I ran this just for period 3 March, I might only see 3 months of data. I do not like those columns because I feel shortchanged myself or my end users analyzing the data, only seeing partial months of the fiscal year where I'd like to always see 12 months. So looking at this first column design of 2, I'm going to be focusing on the period field. Notice this says period 11, 10, 9, 8, etc., which are always driven by my report date, like I ran it for November period 11 of 2019. Now a second column example is a column here to the left. This one here where I'm only looking at the fiscal year. This is the one I said I do not like, because when I'm in period 3, I'll just highlight it to emphasize, when I'm in period 3, I might only see 3 columns of data. And that might also go under the assumption that we have a very nice suppress field where I can say, only show me months that are perhaps, or shall I say suppress, meaning don't display. Do not display perhaps periods that are greater than my reporting period. So usually I might apply this filter to all the columns. So when I run it for period 3, I don't maybe see periods 4 through 12. Because maybe period 3 is closed, but maybe period 4 I'm in the midst of, and I don't want to show period 4 and above. Now, keep that same thought hand in hand, because when I show you a cash flow report, and since I'm in the column, let me just show that we also have some nice little date filters. Not too often do I apply this, but I was recently working with a ski resort company where a bulk of their business was in a very short time frame, where they wanted to have one column looking at maybe the first week of the month, a second column looking at the second week. So what they did is they came up here, basically they said, all right, this column, look through the 1st through the 7th of the month, or maybe column 2, look through maybe the whatever time frame thereafter you can describe. So that's some nice additional filtering abilities we've added amongst maybe tons of other new features that I probably won't have time to share all today, but I like to try to do several. All right, I'm going to wrap up with this column. There now is this balance sheet. Notice here the rounding adjustment. I purposely broke this report to show you that we're out of balance in this 1 month. Looking at the line set, and I'm probably just going to bullet point for time's sake. Well, most often, like we saw in the income statement, I am using summary accounts, so rarely do I need to have formulas. I'm just going to open up that one income statement earlier. I'm sure you did not forget, but that helps my conversation. Here's a summary account for expenses. Here's a summary account for net income. I could have probably used a summary account for revenue like we saw a second report, which means, or rephrased, I rarely need formulas, which in past applications I oftentimes needed. The only time you truly need a formula is when you're ever multiplying and dividing, like this gross profit percent. And really the key rule for formulas in Prospero is your formulas reference codes. Looking at this far left column, the code could either be numeric or alpha, so you can name it anything you wish. So here is in square brackets, I'm just taking my gross profit dollar divided by my revenue row, and that formulates gross profit percent. I'm maybe indenting that row here 5 characters, showing at different number formats. We even can create our own decimal places, underlining, just to name a few of the formatting. And a lot of times I don't get into additional colors of the rainbow. We saw that briefly earlier. All right, so there's a little emphasis of summary accounts. Rarely do I need formulas. And back to this balance sheet, probably same type of story. Now, in the line set, let me share with you perhaps maybe 2 key things. One would be balancing adjustments. That here is where it does automatic rounding. You simply say, what is the row code for total assets? Like you see here in the background, TA is the code for total assets. Or here is total liabilities is the code TLE. And the system's going to ensure those two equal one another if you decide to use this rounding adjustment. Most people don't, but I like to at least let you know that's ability there. This also comes into play if you're multi-currency and have any currency translation gains loss. This is a common technique to have those differences plugged into your balancing row. Finally, the balancing row, we just stuck randomly in this row here called BA for our demonstration purpose. And then here's where you can impose a limit like, hey, if it exceeds that, give me an error like we briefly shared, and I quoted that one little message we saw earlier as I purposely broke this report. All right, let me close out this one window, but there's a couple of key things on the balance sheet. And one other emphasis, more of its accounting 101 like debits and credits. Your balance sheet is always year-to-date ending amounts versus the cash flow that I'll wrap up with is the net change. Let me now come to one of our next reports on cash flow. When I run it, we'll have a couple of columns where we're showing both monthly change in cash followed by year-to-date ending cash. And the primary thing is our column design. And let me change it to a month and year that has data. So excuse me here. The key thing is in our column design for the monthly change in cash, instead of a year-to-date column being for a balance sheet, there's the column to the left headed July is the one I'm referring to regarding my monthly change in cash, or to the right, year-to-date amounts. I'm going to come to the column definition. And let me just say those little buzzwords again. Yep, balance from the general ledger or maybe budgets from Prospero. Here is one field. Periodic just means monthly amounts. Otherwise, I can simply grab year-to-date or beginning. Now, the other key thing is one example for a debit account, but also applies to liabilities as well, credits, is how about the beginning of the month for accounts receivable with debit, it's $300 balance. The end of the month, year-to-date ending is $400, so my balance sheet might show a $400 ending, but the net change from $300 to $400 for the month activity is a positive $100, which would show in this periodic column. However, in my example, when receivables grew by $100, a positive from $300 to $400, we simply want to change or reverse the sign on the account. And that's really the key thing in the line definition I'll get to next. But as I wrap up with a column, this is a usual technique we use. We have two columns that grab maybe period 0. Period 0 is your beginning balance. Otherwise, if I ran this for period 6, that'd give me my activity from period 0, my beginning, through period 6, my report date. Or if I ran it for period 7, period 0 beginning through period 7, my ending, it will give me the net activity, since we're using this one column that shows the net change. I could have done that simply with a periodic column doing a range, but the reason why we use these no print, we're suppressing always, no print. The reason why we're using these two no print columns is one other piece to the puzzle on this statement of cash flow report is I need a beginning cash balance and a year-to-date ending, and these two columns help me accomplish that. Now let's look briefly at our code here. The code can be anything like A, B, C, D, or it could be actual budget. You see this one column formula, same rule I'll repeat. Simply put your code, in this case column code, in square brackets. And then finally, I'm going to wrap up with, in the row definition, you might have to have one or two rows to complete this statement of cash flow accurately. Let's look to the line set. Net income, usually instead of this numeric range, I'd probably use that summary account range like T-net for net income. Then over here to the right, let me just minimize here this navigation pane to the left, we might at times reverse the sign, either individually or sometimes I do it globally for the report. I'll just at least call these fields out at high level here without getting to all the detail on such. And then here is at least this one technique where we said, hey, take inventory -1 here, or take prepaids -1 to change the sign of the account, like my accounts receivable example. That might be another technique utilized. Now finally, that little piece to the puzzle is our cash balance, both maybe beginning and secondly ending. Now this, we use really two rows to accomplish some of this logic. One row is simply to bring in my cash accounts, like you see 1100 through 1110. And really the second row is to get my change in cash defined properly. Because if I were to run this report and showing the hidden columns, you'll show where if this cash, what we'd see is it would net to 0 in one of my cells. And basically this formula, rarely do I need to have an advanced formula like this, because usually a formula like this, I'll again emphasize, says, hey, take year-to-date income, what I'll call row A, plus row B, 7100. That's your most easy formula. If I go inside this little pick list, this little asterisk, it reads above saying, hey, normally formulas you never have to worry about. Yeah, usually the formula applies to all columns you have. Well, this window also gives you a much added ability to have what are called qualifiers. Like on the budget side, maybe I'm using this one line set for every department, but maybe this one formula I only want to use for, let's say, my sales division. Either it could be an individual department like 100. I might restrict this formula for, and I'm again more talking about the budget side, since they might share all the same template for budgeting. Or instead of an individual department, maybe I create a node of my tree called total sales. So that might apply to maybe 10 different departments via a tree node or summary I've just defined here. As I cancel out this window, let me wrap up with this example here is where when I showed you the column, we really had two printing columns. B was my monthly, and then column E was my second printing column. E in the column formula took maybe my ending balance, column D, minus C, my beginning balance for the year. But here is basically where we just need to say, hey, in this one cell, we need to correct it. So instead of taking beginning cash net, like let's call $500 beginning cash for both the year-to-date beginning, year-to-date end, instead of netting to 0, I correctly place and position that. And I'll just sort of paraphrase it with such. So we have some excellent documentation of this through some of our training and user guides. So as I start to wrap this up, I'll put my email as a big thank you. So for those existing customers, you probably should have received our Prospero training and user guides during implementation. If you did not, please feel free to email me. I'll make sure you get those soft copies that you can download. And then for prospective customers, I see several on today's call. If you would like to see an additional glimpse of this product, even looking at a sample of your own data, we have some nice little takeaways there for you. And this leaves me for about 5 minutes of time. I'm just going to segue to see if any questions came inside the queue. Bear with me just a second. I do a couple of clicks on my side here. A lot of times people are just like sponges. They're absorbing all this data. So initially, I don't see any questions that did come in. So I'll start to wrap up. And again, thank you for attending. Open door policy, so feel free to reach out anytime. And we'll be publishing these recordings out to our website, and I'll send a nice little thank you that people that both registered and attended today with maybe a few little action item takeaways as well. So have a good rest of your day, stay safe, and look forward to you in a future webinar. Goodbye.